top 5 bullish charts in crypto right now. GM, welcome to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. We are here to make sense of an on-chain world in constant transformation. I'm Kyle Reedhead, your host for today's episode, which is the first of a brand new show we are bringing to the Web3 Academy listeners called Market Watch. It's here to give you a pulse on what's happening in markets every single week. I want to share my analysis on why markets are moving and where they're going next. The show will be available every single Wednesday, and starting the new year, I'll periodically bring on other market analysts to hear their perspective on markets as well. Today, we are covering 5 different charts, and those charts are the ETH chart, ETH Bitcoin or ETH BTC, Coinbase, IMX or Immutable, as well as the altcoin market cap. Now, each of these sections will be covered and started with a chart. There'll be some technical analysis there in terms of what the chart looks like, where the price action has been lately, and where I think it's going. And then we'll touch on some fundamentals, maybe some narrative types things, as well as potentially some macro as well. Each week, we're going to dive into something different. It just depends on what's the big thing on our mind or the big things happening in the markets during that time. As I said, there'll be technical analysis, there'll be macro analysis, there'll be on-chain analysis. There'll be a mix of many different things. Okay, well, that should give you a good idea of what we're discussing here today. Let's get into it. What else do we have to do today, right? It's been a wild week in markets, and it's time we dive into it. Before we do, though, let's take a quick second to hear from our sponsors.
Modern newsletters are built on Paragraph. That's right. Paragraph is a brand new newsletter platform that combines the best parts of Web 2 and Web 3 to supercharge newsletters for both writers and readers. Build a community, not just an audience. Paragraph uses blockchain tech to allow readers to collect and own the words that matter to them. This takes reading a newsletter to the next level. With Paragraph, readers can mint, collect, and show off quotes from their favorite newsletters. This opens new possibilities like creators sharing revenue with fans. I also love their new feature, Paragraph AI. This integrates GPT-4 natively in Paragraph to create, edit, and improve your writing effortlessly with one click. And guess what? We at Web3 Academy are on board and have already moved our content over to Paragraph. We believe this is the future of newsletters because of the profound engagement it creates between creators and fans. So, whether you're a creator, writer, or an avid reader, it's time to check out Paragraph and capitalize on the opportunity of being early.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Market Watch episode. We're going to start this one off with the Ethereum chart. The reason I bring up Ethereum is it's one of the most important assets in the space right now. I mean, of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum, the two largest by a long shot. Bitcoin has about an $800 billion market cap at the moment. Ethereum is getting close to $300 billion, and the next closest is really nowhere even near close to that. It's below 100 billion, and I think even below 50 billion. But here you go. BNB is 35 billion. So there's not much close to Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so these are the two assets that really are driving markets. And these are the ones that we want to pay attention to because they're the ones that are currently legitimized both in the crypto world, but also outside the crypto world. And they are what are going to drive the broader crypto markets. As long as we see success in Bitcoin and ETH, we will see success in others as well. Of course, others will do better, and that's fine. That's not a big deal. But we want to make sure that our major assets are doing well. ETH has been lagging, right? Bitcoin has had a hell of a year so far. It's done extremely well, up about 180% over the year. So pretty impressive on what it's done there. Ethereum, though, has lagged. We're up about 80% year to date. And the question is why, right? Solana has also done extremely well. The next sort of potential major that we have in our industry, although I wouldn't put it in that category just yet. But why has ETH lagged? And you know, who knows the answer to that question, right? Our industry is very narrative driven. And this year, the narrative has been Bitcoin, right? It's been the spot Bitcoin ETF. And so I think that's been a big reason why Bitcoin has seen the growth that it has so far. And then, of course, Solana, who was on his deathbed earlier this year with FTX collapsing, really got into the spotlight over the last few months as people realized, oh, this is a legitimate community, a legitimate technology. And so people realized they were underexposed to Solana and a lot of capital moved to Sol. Since then, I mean, Sol's kind of been stuck a little bit here at the $60 range, and ETH has started to see a bit of a bounce over the last little bit. So let's talk about that. Well, I flagged a few weeks ago, actually about a month ago now, this sort of downward channel, okay? You could also look at it as maybe like a bull flag. It depends on how you want to look at it. But this downward channel here is something I've been flagging for a while. And I said when it breaks through, it should jump quickly to 2K plus. By the way, if you're listening on the podcast, I've got a chart of Ethereum up here. I'll do my best to explain it to you. You might want to watch on YouTube or on Spotify, but I'll explain it so you should be completely fine. So feel free to sit back and relax. Now, I said once we got out of this channel, it would jump to 2K. It did that. It jumped way past 2K real quick, hit up to 2140, which was the prior resistance that we hit back in April as well. And it kind of like bounced back off that and has been kind of dipped below and just been kind of chilling below it for a little while. And then just recently, we really pushed above 2140. 2140 is this blue line that you can see right here. Now, the reason this line is important is one, it's been resistance all year. So we haven't been able to get past it. The other reason that this is a big deal is that once we get past it, there's really no resistance or not much technicals until we get above 3,000. And so that means we have a big move coming our way in ETH if it passes 2140. Now, good news, it just recently passed 2140 over the weekend. And so after it hit 2140, it jumped up to about 2275. It has since pulled back a little bit, which is expected after such a big move like that. Currently today, as I record this, which is December 5th, we're sitting at 2213. So maybe it comes back and tests this blue line. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see. Honestly, doesn't really matter. The key thing for you to understand here is that we have finally broken that resistance. We may turn it into support, but we are clear sailing from here up to about 3,000. I expect to see this move happen fairly quickly. Now, when, who knows? I don't try to guess short term. We're not here to do technical analysis to try to see what's going to happen in the next hour. That's not what this is about. This is really just to see where our market's going. Where do we want to be putting our capital if we're currently dollar cost averaging? Which assets should we be buying? I think ETH is a good one right now. The reason I think this is that spot Bitcoin ETF is more than likely to be approved within the next month. I guess they're saying it's, January, I think it's 5th to the 12th or something like that is when the window is for these to be approved, if not earlier. And so we're about a month away. And once that gets approved, and I'm saying once it does, because I think it will get approved, all eyes are on the ETH spot ETF after that, which won't be too long after. Suggestions right now are maybe somewhere in May. And so I think either before the Bitcoin ETF gets approved or right at that moment, a lot of capital is likely going to rotate into ETH to now catch that trade, to catch the ETH ETF trade, just like we've had of the Bitcoin one over the last however many months, really since BlackRock filed. So that's what I'm expecting. We also, in terms of Ethereum, it's got fundamentals, right? This thing has improved so much since the last cycle. It's now proof of stake, which it was not in the last cycle, which means we don't have all the miner sell pressure, which is massive. And I think people are still underestimating how big that is. We have the burn, which we didn't have in the last cycle, which means we're burning a lot of ETH, and we are currently in a deflationary tokenomic structure, which is amazing. We have product market fit in terms of L2s, meaning a bunch of different technologies want to settle on top of Ethereum because it's a decentralized settlement layer. And so whether that's exchanges that want to bring their users on chain and they're doing that through building L2s, whether it's general purpose L2s like Optimism and Arbitrum, whether that's game specific L2s like Immutable, or it's app specific ones, there's just so many. And we're probably over 100 different L2s now that are all paying for block space on Ethereum. This is a big deal. And I think there's a lot of confusion in the ETH versus Sol narrative, which I'm going to touch on probably next week in the Market Watch, and I'll dive deeper into it. But I think there's just a lot of noise, and a lot of people are kind of fighting ETH at the moment because it hasn't moved. But this is pretty normal, and an ETH no doubt has product market fit and is such a better asset than it was last cycle. So like we are going to all-time highs. There's no doubt in my mind. And I think we're going to quickly run to 3,000. Whether we test 2140 first or not, I don't know. Don't really care. Still buying, still staking my ETH. And I think it's going to do really, really well this cycle. So that's the first chart there. Just something to look forward to. I think we're going to get a big run in ETH coming soon. We've been pretty accurate with our calls lately. Now, it doesn't mean that we're always going to be right here, but we did call Sol pretty early on when it was down, I think around $30, if not before that. We called the Bitcoin run. We called the Coinbase run as well, which is we'll get to in a second. So lots going on. I think we're going to see a run in ETH, and this is going to be pretty exciting because the other reason why this is a big deal is there's a lot of assets on Ethereum. Most assets are on Ethereum. When Solana ran, there wasn't a lot of other things on Solana to run with it. NFTs did really well. Bonk, which is its meme coin, obviously did really well. There just isn't many other tokens yet. They're coming, but there just isn't. And on Ethereum, there's so many. There's L2 tokens, there's gaming tokens, there's DeFi tokens, there's so many. And as the ETH ecosystem grows in value, many of those tokens will as well. So if you're going farther down the risk curve, investing in Ethereum ecosystem tokens right now, probably a good play because I think we're about to see ETH go to 3K. All right, that's my thoughts on the Ethereum ecosystem. Let's move on. And by the way, if you have any questions and you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify, you can hit in the comments below and hit me up. Ask a question, share your feedback. Maybe you disagree with what I'm saying. Let me hear it. I want to learn with you. And each week we can kind of grow together and learn together, which, by the way, if you have not yet, make sure you subscribe to our channels. Make sure you like the video if you're on YouTube and help us grow. We would absolutely love that. All right, on to ETH Bitcoin. This is a crazy chart. I'm just going to zoom it out a little bit here for everyone to see. So a lot of people have talked about this range that we've been in for ETH Bitcoin, which is this sort of like green range that you can see. And this is since 2021, about April, we jumped into this. And we've sort of been ranging into these levels for the last like 2 years. And we haven't been able to break out of it. We haven't been able to break below it. The numbers I'm talking about are 0.049 up to 0.088, okay? Again, this is the ETH versus Bitcoin for those that are not watching right now. And so we've just been in this range. Not a whole lot has happened. We've gone to the very top of it where it looked like ETH was going to be the best one and it was going to break out. And then we've gone to the bottom where it looked like Bitcoin was going to break out and then back up for ETH. And we are actually back down kind of near the lows. But I want to zoom out further and forget about that green range just for a second and look at these two blue lines that I've put on this chart. It looks a little bit weird, but this is a pretty common chart, which is a wedge pattern, okay? And wedge pattern just basically shows that you're going to break out either the upside or the downside. And typically what you do is when you have a pattern like this, you would take the line from the top of the blue line there to the bottom, and that's your sort of breakout length. And so you could take it either to the upside. Whoa. You could take it either to the upside. Let me just move that over. Or you could take it down. You can see it's a very big move, right? So you could take it to the upside here. We're now at 1.4 if Ethereum breaks the upside. And then you could also go down below if Bitcoin breaks to the downside, or Ethereum breaks the downside, I guess you would call it. And we're at like let me get my screen there. 0.0028, right? So these are really, really big moves. Now, the timing you see, the time frames from this is not accurate. This is just the potential length it goes. It could take months, could take years to play out. But let's talk about ETH Bitcoin just a little bit here. So obviously, as I just mentioned in the ETH section, Bitcoin has had a really good year, right? During the bear market, actually, ETH held up pretty strong, which I think most people were surprised. It doesn't normally do this. Now it's only had another one bear market before this, but it hasn't done this previously. The fact that ETH held up so strong in the bear market had a lot of people pretty impressed with ETH. A lot of that, I think, was because of its move to proof of stake, which lowered its inflation, and then also the burn, which helped it become deflationary. And so it showed that it was a strong asset. Now, as usual, Bitcoin does perform better in bear markets, and finally, Bitcoin has done that. And it's generally early bull or pre-bull, I guess you could call it, where Bitcoin starts to really take off and its dominance really, really goes through the roof, which I will actually show in just a second. And so that's basically what's happened. So it was actually kind of expected. It felt a little bit like ETH was going to maybe outperform in a bear market for the first time. It didn't happen. Either way, here's what we're at in this sort of big wedge pattern here. If we look and kind of zoom in, I want to make sure we can see it. Bitcoin has actually bounced right off this wedge line, which is crazy. This is a 7-year-long wedge pattern. And ETH has bounced off that back up. We're now actually down, touching it one more time here. Bitcoin's had a nice little run over the last couple of days. We're up at 42,000, just above that now on Bitcoin. ETH had its run as well, but now it's sort of paused for the last 24 hours. Again, this is very short term I'm talking about. So Bitcoin is doing quite well here. I would expect it to bounce off again, but let's see. Maybe I'm wrong. I believe that Ethereum is a stronger asset in terms of its tokenomics. And so my bet here, which is shown in my portfolio, is that Ethereum is going to break to the upside. So we're probably going to bounce off this blue line. Look, maybe it comes below it. It's fine. I don't think it does for very long. For it to confirm, it has to actually come out, maybe touch it again, and then go. Just if it breaks out for 1 second or a couple of days or, whatever, a couple of weeks, it's not really a confirmation. But my assumption is ETH ends up breaking out. I think, again, when it happens is when the ETFs are approved. I think Bitcoin might have one leg higher, and then when that ETF gets approved, and I think it's all ETH from there. It could even happen sooner. Here's the Bitcoin dominance chart, just to play on what I was just talking about here. This is Bitcoin versus the total crypto market cap. And we have some similar patterns. So back in, 2016, there was just no assets at the time. So Bitcoin was almost 100%. It was sitting at 99% dominance of the market. So meaning 99% of the total market cap was made up of Bitcoin's market cap. Obviously, then Ethereum was the next big asset to be released. And that brought the market cap, the dominance story, down by a lot. So Bitcoin ended up only being about 35% during the bull market, which is typical. It always goes down in bull markets. Then in the bear market, Bitcoin took back over. It made it up all the way to 74%, 73%-ish during the bear. And then again, the bull market came back in 2020, 2021, and it went down to about 38%. Now we've been driving all the way back up. Bitcoin's sitting at 54.5% dominance at the moment. My assumption is it doesn't reach the highs of last market, okay? The reason is there's just a lot more assets than there was last cycle, just like there was the previous cycle, right? So what I sort of look at is maybe a trend line. You don't really know where to start it, but let's say it's somewhere here. If we bring it down, touching on that, if you can see my screen here, I'm just going from the previous cycles and touching the tops of the Bitcoin dominance percentage. And if I bring it all the way out to now, we're looking at maybe Bitcoin goes another 4 or 5% to get to about 58%, depending on when it happens, somewhere between 57 and 58%. So maybe one more leg up just based off the size of these ones. And then I think it tops out there if it even reaches that. Let's see, probably it reaches that trend line, but honestly, I don't know. But again, even if that does move, it doesn't mean Ethereum doesn't move along with it or other assets don't move along with it as well. But that's sort of what we're looking at there. So I do think we get maybe one more move in Bitcoin. And again, I think this comes as the spot Bitcoin ETF is approved. After that, I think it's all ETH. So, and generally when ETH starts to really move, that signals it's bull market time and the mania starts to ensue. So I think that's when things start to get a little bit crazier, which again will probably happen at some point in the new year, which may also coincide with interest rates being lowered. So the other thing to remember here is every time Bitcoin dominance has started to go down, that's actually coincided with interest rates being lowered. And it happened both cycles. So Bitcoin dominance continues to go up in the bull market until interest rates are lowered, then it goes down. Now, maybe that's just a coincidence, who knows, but that could happen. And timing looks pretty good. I think probably Q1, Q2, we start to see interest rates go lower as we continue to see inflation go down. And so let's see, that's sort of what I'm eyeing. But again, this will change. And every week I will make sure to update my thesis to you in the Market Watch episodes. All right, next up, probably the best investment I've had all year, except for maybe Solana, although I kind of think Coinbase might have beaten it by now, but that is Coinbase. Coinbase has had an incredible story. It launched at the very peak of the bull run back in, I think it was November. What do we got here? This doesn't even show me. But anyway, somewhere around November 2021, maybe a little bit before that. But anyway, I guess this is saying April 2021 is when it launched. So it was the first peak. There was 2 peaks in that bull run. It launched at around $430, $430, and it's basically been down only ever since. And it reached sort of its bottom back in January 2023. And since then, it has been basically up only. Coinbase obviously has, we just did a pro report of this, so if you have not checked that out, make sure you check out our newsletter. The link is in the show notes below. And you want to go pro to see the Coinbase pro report, where we dove into all the fundamentals. They are just an incredible business. They have plenty of revenue streams that are good in the bear market, good in the bull market. They're just a dominant company in this space, and I think will continue to be that. So I'm very bullish on the fundamentals of Coinbase. But what I wanted to show here in terms of this chart was this inverse head and shoulders. Also another very common chart pattern, which generally has a pretty large breakout when it does break out of it. I call it a head and shoulders because you have the head, this is inverse. So imagine this was flipped the other way. Basically, it's just you have a shoulder, then a head, and then a shoulder. And the chart pattern just kind of plays out that way. This is inverse, so it's flipped upside down. And then at the bottom of that, or at the top in this instance, that blue line there would be like the neckline, right? It's where the shoulder and the head, everything kind of meets up there. And so basically what happens is once it breaks through that, you take the length of the bottom, so the length of the head there to the neckline, and you can move that up from the neckline there, and it shows you how far it's likely to run. Now here, there's 2 interesting numbers here for Coinbase. So Coinbase is currently, it's even ripping today as I speak, up 3.3%. It's sitting at $145. I bought this at $38 earlier this year, which was amazing. We put a call in the Pro Report newsletter at, I think it was around $55 or $56. And that was in like, I don't know, August, maybe a little before that. I can't remember. Now we're already sitting at 145. Now, here's the thing. The neckline, so the resistance, I guess, was at $114. We smashed through that. Absolutely just ripped through it, went straight to 145. There is no resistance until $210. And so I think we get there really quickly. As long as Bitcoin and ETH continue to go up, Coinbase is just going to fly up, probably more than they will. Right now, Coinbase looks like a leveraged bet on ETH and or Bitcoin, whichever. It doesn't matter. As long as one goes up, Coinbase is making money from it, right? If Bitcoin goes up, Coinbase has lots of Bitcoin. It facilitates the trade of Bitcoin. It is the custodian for all the Bitcoin ETF issuers. So Coinbase is super bullish when good things happen to Bitcoin. And then what are most of the assets on on Coinbase? They're Ethereum assets. Whereas Base, the L2 that Coinbase launched, it's on Ethereum. So if Ethereum does well, Coinbase also does well. And even Solana does well. Coinbase does well, because where do you trade and buy Solana? You often get it in Coinbase if you're North American. It's like an ETF on the entire crypto ecosystem, but then it also generates revenues. It's a pretty incredible investment. I think it quickly goes to 210. Then if we look at the pattern here that I was explaining from the head to the neckline, you put that up, it goes up to, interestingly, about 410, 400, and maybe it's 12, which is right about at all-time highs. Now, again, it's not going to jump there right away. It's probably going to have some struggles around 210 because it looks like there's a bit of, resistance there. But again, I think it should be pretty smooth sailing to get to all-time highs as the Bitcoin ETF is approved and the broader crypto market continues to look bullish and improve. So look, it's had a big run. So should you buy right now? It's anyone's guess. Again, short-term stuff is not my forte. It's really not anyone's forte in this industry. You never know what's going to happen. But I think as long as nothing bad happens, like the ETF not getting approved, I think Coinbase continues to just go up. And I mean, where else can you get a stock that's going to run up? I mean, it's up almost 300% this year. Actually, it's up way more than that year to date, because we started down at 38. So quite impressive. But anyway, I think it's still going to go up quite a bit over the next, few months. So probably still a great investment there. But who knows in the short term, just because it's literally ran up so much. If you look at this chart, every week is just crazy green candles upwards. So it's been a wild ride. But that said, an amazing, amazing company and a very important one for this industry. We want them to do really, really well. Okay, the fourth chart that I want to look at today is Immutable. And so Immutable is an L2 on top of Ethereum, and it is a gaming L2. So it's focused solely on gaming. It has over 200 games currently, many of which are high quality AAA games, and many are like mobile games. There's many different types. Now, some of them have launched, not all of them. I would say most of them have not launched, but they're beginning to launch this year or over the next, let's say, 9 to 12 months kind of thing. Illuvium, which is probably the biggest and the most highest profile of them all, has just launched on Epic Games recently in beta, but the full launch will be coming soon. This one is expected to be a pretty big game. They've been building for a long time. They have, I think, over hundreds of millions backing it. It's a pretty big deal. The reason why I talk about Immutable here is, one, you could think of Immutable as almost an ETF for the gaming world. Look, there are games on Solana, there are games on Ronin, there are games on Polygon, etc., but there is no platform like Immutable. The reason that Immutable is differentiated from everyone else is that there's no gas fees on Immutable. So Immutable has this very different business model where they actually pay for the gas fees for all the apps and all the users. And so when you use Immutable, you don't ever have to think about gas fees. You don't need to fund your wallet to pay for gas fees. It doesn't exist. You also don't need things like a MetaMask wallet or a Phantom wallet like you would on other chains. You use a thing called Passport, which connects you in with all the games on Immutable. And it's a very Web 2-like experience. You sign up with email. You can pay for things with credit card. You don't really need to know about, you don't even have to actually integrate or use crypto at all to be on Immutable and to play these games. So it's on a whole nother level than everything else. Even like I'm a big fan of Solana, and everyone's like, oh, Solana's the best and it's so cheap and it's fast. Gamers are going to want to be there. And it's like, look, even if you're like a fraction of a penny in fees or a fraction of a penny, it doesn't matter because this is free. And so the difference is just in terms of UX, it's not even a comparison. And you can't do that on something like Solana unless you have an L2. So this is one of the reasons that I think people are missing why L2s are so important, is you can create an experience like this. Now, how does Immutable do this? This is sustainable. It is. It's because they take, I think it's 2% off of every trade or every transaction that happens on Immutable. So there's no gas, but they just take a percent of every transaction, and then they take that revenue and they pay for the gas fees on Ethereum. Now, the big catalyst, I think, for Immutable, other than a bunch of games launching over the next few months, which is going to be huge as their volume, transactions, and users pick up, that's just going to be so big for the revenues. But the other side of it is their expenses are about to get slashed by an order of magnitude. Q1 of 2024, EIP 4844 goes live, which will reduce the cost to transact on Ethereum for L2s by about an order of magnitude. And so the expenses of Immutable is about to go down big time, while the revenues are also about to go up big time. And then it's also, if you hold IMX and you stake it, you can generate yield from it. So they've just got just about everything figured out. And again, it has the same pattern as Coinbase, very similar with an inverse head and shoulders. And so same thing, there's potential for, it hasn't broken out yet though. Coinbase has, IMX has not. It's currently fighting resistance on that neckline that I talked about. But if it does break, we're looking at IMX going from currently at 1.43 going up to above $5 for one IMX. So pretty big jump. That could happen pretty quickly. The only thing I would say is when you look at this, and I know, by the way, Web3 gaming is kind of a meme at this point in this industry. Is it really ever going to take off? I do think it will. I just think it's taken a while for the technology to get there. And I think no tech has done better than what Immutable has done for gaming. And so I think this cycle will finally be the first one that this will all happen and play out. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting. But the one thing to look at here is this is the price chart. This is a really important lesson for any token in crypto, especially the smaller cap ones. So the market cap of Immutable is like 1.7 billion. So it's pretty small, but not that small. Either way, the thing to keep in mind here is that if we look at market cap, it's already at all-time highs. So what the first chart I'm showing here is price, where this inverse head and shoulders, it's way below all-time highs. But that's because over the last 2 years, Immutable has been giving out tokens to games. That's how they fund their grants to actually get games to build on top of Immutable. They don't have to do that so much now because, I mean, they just have the best technology. And so people want to build there, but they still are funding a ton. And so you have token unlocks. And so they've had a ton of token unlocks, which is part of a good thing for the token, right? You have less new supply coming out, although there still is some. There's still token unlocks, just less than there was then. But as a result, the market cap gets more and more as more tokens get put onto the market. And so even though price is not back at all-time highs, the market cap is actually past all-time highs. So I think it's fine. In a bull market, it's very likely that this market cap goes much higher than what are we at? 1.8. Yeah, 1.8 billion right now. I think we go much higher than this. I mean, for example, Axie Infinity, just one game, it reached a $40 billion market cap last cycle. Now, that was in a speculative mania. The people playing that wasn't sustainable. The fees that Ronin or that AXS Axie Infinity was making during that game was unsustainable. And so the market cap was definitely an unsustainable market cap for that game. But let's say Immutable gets a few of those games, 2 of those games this cycle, 3, 4, whatever, and a bunch of smaller games. I mean, there's just so much potential activity and so much potential volume, which means so much potential revenue for IMX and Immutable to make, which thus then goes back to the IMX holders. I just think that there's so much room for growth for Immutable if Web3 gaming takes off, which I do think it will. So I could see this being a 10, 20, 30 plus billion market cap this cycle, no problem, to be honest. So I do think this is one of the tokens that I'm most excited about. And it's just an easy way to play Web3 gaming. It is very tough to go and find the game that's going to make it and break out. Sure, you could go put some in Illuvium, you could put some in Star Atlas on Solana, you can put some in whatever game you want, but the chances of choosing a specific game that's going to really take off and blow up, it's pretty slim. So this is sort of your ETF for Web3 gaming is the way I see it. And of course, I don't like to go too far down the risk curve. That's why I like Coinbase. That's why I like Immutable. That's why I like ETH. These are all sort of like low risk plays on a specific sector. Ethereum is just basically Web3 in general. Same with Solana. Coinbase is the whole space. And then IMX is Web3 gaming. So that's generally how I like to play things because it's just much easier. All right, let's go to the final chart as we wrap up here. And that is the total market cap, excluding Bitcoin and ETH. And so this is really your altcoin. I don't really consider ETH an altcoin at this point. I don't even like the term altcoin. It's an old term from alts, meaning alts from Bitcoin. So there used to be Bitcoin and then a bunch of alternatives to Bitcoin. Nothing really in the altcoin category is an alternative to Bitcoin anymore. Ethereum is very different. Solana is very different. And then all the gaming tokens and things, these are not competing with Bitcoin. So they're not alts. So anyway, that doesn't really matter. But if we look again, we sort of see a head and shoulders. If we look at the chart here of altcoin, we see the inverse head and shoulders once again that we've just broken out of. Whether that's a head and shoulders or not it's less apparent. But regardless, you have this sort of like resistance line throughout this bear market, right? We've tapped on it a bunch of times throughout the year, but never been able to break through it. We did break through it, but we came right back down later in August. And so we've stayed below it for about a year and a half, and we're just finally breaking through. We came back down, we sort of tested it, and now we're on the way back up. Currently, just this week, we tested it one more time. And so likely we've turned it into support, and then I think we're kind of up from here. We don't know. We could go back below. Let's see. We're still in that like really important phase of what's going to happen here. But the interesting thing from this is the same chart pattern happened last cycle. If I zoom out a little bit, we have the same pattern here. I don't have the line on it, but you can see my screen. I'll just put like a fake line here. Interesting thing is this took 2 years to break out of last cycle, and we're currently doing it in 1.5 years. This cycle, we seem to be sort of speed running things. Now, maybe this means we're due for a big time pullback. We had a bunch of these last cycle as well, right? We had a big run up, then we went way down, then we ran up again, and then this probably would have continued to run up, but it's the COVID dump. So that likely wouldn't have happened if we didn't have COVID. But we did have a huge run up and then a big run down last cycle. So will that happen again? It's yet to be seen. We are way ahead of schedule of this bull market. So potentially we do, but it's tough to see us getting a big pullback when you have ETFs on the horizon, a Bitcoin one and an ETH one. There's just so much demand. And then for the first time, I think, and I'll get into this more in other market watches, but we just don't have a lot of Bitcoin or ETH on exchanges. There's just not a lot of supply available for people to buy anymore. And I think that's because there's just a lot more to do on chain. And this is true of Bitcoin and ETH. Part of it is because there's more to do. Part of it is because of all the issues with FTX and Celsius, et cetera. People don't trust centralized exchanges anymore. And so a lot of these assets have moved to remain on chain, on someone's ledger and their own self-custodial wallet, which is great. But it does mean that when the demand really picks up, if there's just not a lot less supply, then the price has no choice but to go up, right? And to get these big dips, it's hard to see them happening because so many people are on the sidelines because of how macro has played out. Just a lot of people missed this run up this year. And so I think there's just a lot of capital waiting to buy dips. So you never know in crypto. We're always going to have dips. I don't see it at this point in the cycle yet. So I don't think we're going to have a repeat of last cycle. I think we might be getting an early Christmas present. And I think the altcoin market cap is going to just continue to go up from here. I do think Bitcoin and ETH beat it for the foreseeable future because of the ETFs, but I think you're still going to see some pretty good numbers here at altcoins. Another big differentiator from this cycle versus last that I think a lot of people are missing is you actually have real stuff this year. Last cycle, in the early phases of the bull market, there wasn't anything on chain yet. There was a couple DeFi protocols, but like none of them had meaningful adoption whatsoever until like late 2020. There wasn't like NFTs, there wasn't games, there wasn't any of this kind of stuff really. And so like it was all super speculative. Now, of course, it's all still speculative today, but you actually have real stuff. I mean, if you look at Immutable, that's considered an altcoin. It's got some pretty amazing tailwinds behind it and things that are going to support it. And it's got a lot of games building on it. It's got profitable revenues. So like, it's not really a shit coin. It exists and it's a good technology and so on and so forth. And you have a bunch of games doing the same that, Illuvium is on Epic Games. Like, how can you say that that's a shit coin? So like, you have a lot that's going on even during this bear market that we just never had in a cycle before. And I think that's why we're seeing more strength in this altcoin market cap this time around. Also, why I think we don't get as high in the Bitcoin dominance, right? Some people are calling for it to get back to these levels, the 72%. I don't see it when you have so much happening in the crypto space. People that are calling for this are usually Bitcoin maxis. They don't know what's going on in the rest of the Ethereum and Solana ecosystems. Even speaking of Solana, there's another thing. Every airdrop that happens, that market cap gets added on to this, right? And so you just had the Pyth network, which is the chain link of Solana, which is currently sitting at 600 million, I think, or 650 million in market cap. It's been around for just a couple of weeks. And then you're going to have Jito, which launches probably this week, which is the Lido version of Solana. And let's say that gets another 500 million. We're looking at there's another billion added to the market cap. Then you have Jupiter, which is the big exchange. And so maybe that's another 500 million or even a billion. And so now we're at 2 billion plus. And there's going to be a bunch more airdrops, both in the Ethereum and Solana ecosystems. This total market cap, I think, just is going to continue to grow from here. a lot more airdrops happen during bull markets than bear markets. We didn't have many airdrops the last year and a half because there's not a lot of demand. So it's not the best time to do it. Of course, some did it like Blur, etc. But I think you're going to get a bunch more now because you're getting more demand. Every month, you're going to have more people entering the Web3 ecosystem. That's the best time to be doing airdrops. So I think this market cap continues to do very, very well. That basically covers it. Just to summarize here, to wrap up, look, I think we've got maybe one more leg left in Bitcoin because of the spot ETF. When that gets approved, no doubt a bunch of people are going to buy thinking that they're early. All of us have been really early. Those people will, maybe there's a sell the news event. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen there, but I think Bitcoin gets one more leg up in terms of its dominance. Then I think it's ETH rips, probably altcoin market runs with it. And I think we start this bull market. Again, as long as macro continues to move favorably in our direction, which it is, you've got the dollar going down, you've got inflation going down, you've got unemployment going up, you've got liquidity, global liquidity going up, which I've talked about a bunch. So you just got a lot of things that just look really bullish. And so these 5 charts I just shared are sort of the macro charts of crypto, I would say, in terms of the macro assets. And I think we are set up for a big push in all of these over the next, I think December is going to be a really good month for us, as it already has been. And I think at some point we'll get a pause. At some point we'll probably get a pullback, but who knows how big that'll be? Who knows how long that'll last? Again, I'm a big dollar cost averager more than anything, just because it's easier. But here's kind of a pulse on what's happening in markets, what to look forward to. If you're wondering if you should still be buying, if you're wondering what's happening next, hopefully this will answer it for you. That's a wrap. I'm going to drop it there. I'll see you next week in next week's Market Watch. I think I'm going to cover Solana and ETH and just go a bit of a deep dive on the fundamentals and the technicals there on what I think is going to play out during the cycle between the two of those. If you guys have any questions, you have anything you want me to cover, please just let me know in the comments. If you're on YouTube, you can comment there. If you're on Spotify, you can comment there. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or somewhere else, then jump in our Discord and you can hit me up in there. I'm always available. Otherwise, make sure to like, to follow us, to subscribe wherever you're listening so that you don't miss the next one. But thank you, friends, so much for joining me here in this first Market Watch. This will be a new weekly thing. I'm excited to spend an hour, about 45 minutes with you every single week talking all things markets. Friends, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe or follow so that you don't miss the next one. While you're at it, there's a link in the description for our free newsletter where we provide timely and relevant Web3 insights so you can confidently build and invest in Web3. Make sure to subscribe today. One final note. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Crypto and Web3 are risky, and you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.